Hey everyone, welcome to Taking the Pulse, a healthcare and life sciences video podcast. I am Heather Hoops Matthews, here today with Maynard Nexon healthcare attorney Lauren DeMoss. Lauren, good to be with you.
Great to be here in Charleston, Heather.
That's right. We are at SCbio's annual conference held here this year in Charleston, South Carolina. It's really one of the Southeast's premier life sciences event, bringing together amazing presentations and industry leaders, one of whom is joining us today, Eric Perrault. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You joined Kiyatec in March of 2023 as president. You're now CEO, been in that position for about a year.
Yeah.
Tell us about your company and what your team is working on.
Yeah, thank you. So we are a 3D cell culture company. And really what we're doing is we're taking a portion of the patient's tumor tissue, we're keeping it alive, and it gets sent to our lab in Greenville, South Carolina. And within 7 days, we produce a report back to that patient's oncologist that indicates which chemotherapy actually killed their cancer. So it's quite remarkable. So we're kind of moving away from the days of hoping that a chemotherapy will work and moving to a period where we say, we're predicting that the chemotherapy works.
I mean, it's amazing to know that we can do that now.
Yeah.
When years ago, it was just, would the chemo work? Then we had options. And now what you're saying is you're taking out the guesswork.
We are, and we're doing that with direct interaction with the patient's live cancer cells. So the drugs that are readily available, they're all FDA approved, are actually being introduced directly to a spheroid, that the cells are all part of that spheroid, and then we watch to see if the cells die. And that's what we want, right? We want the cancer cells to die and not thrive. And that's what our technology does. So we produce this report, and then the oncologist can have a one-on-one conversation with the patient and the patient's family to say, here's what we think you should consider. We were hoping the standard of care drug was going to work, but it looks like your cells did not respond to that. They did not die. But there are these three other options. And if there are no other options, then maybe there's a clinical trial the patient can join. Those questions before Kiyatec and 3D Predict were very difficult to answer with confidence. But now you can answer those questions with confidence because you actually do the experiment, you do the work in our lab.
That's wonderful.
How long does that process take?
7 days.
Wow.
So from the moment, we started with glioblastoma, which is brain cancer, and it's a very dramatic diagnosis. So most glioblastoma patients will only live about 12 months on average. So these patients, they just want to live longer. When they're diagnosed, it usually happens in an emergency department. They usually have had some type of urgent event where they have the worst headache of their lives, or they've had a seizure. They go to the emergency department, and through imaging, they see a mass on the brain. Within 24 to 48 hours, that patient is going through surgery, brain surgery, to remove the tumor. During that process, they take a small portion of the patient's tissue, which is about the size of a number 2 pencil eraser. So it's really, really small. That gets put into our proprietary matrix and gets shipped overnight using UPS Healthcare to our lab in Greenville, South Carolina. And from that day, by day 7, we have all the information that we need to turn a report around that says these are the drugs that your cancer responded to.
That's amazing. You mentioned glioblastoma. Are there other types of cancers that you're either seeing a lot of that come or have a better success rate in terms of what you all are looking at?
Yeah, so we started with glioblastoma. We launched late last year ovarian. So that's our second test. So we have a glioblastoma panel, we have an ovarian panel. Later this year, we will launch a brain metastasis panel. So it's brain cancer that started somewhere else in the body. And the one that we're starting with is the one that started in the lungs and then shows up on the patient's brain. So those will be our 3 panels. However, any solid tumor, so not a blood cancer, but any solid tumor, we should be able to process in our lab. So the plan will be to launch breast cancer, and then non-small cell lung cancer primary will launch, and we'll be able to process all those in our laboratory.
It sounds like you're starting with the hardest monsters to
You're starting with the ones like glioblastoma is extremely critical, and all these patients want is more time. And so they don't want to waste the first 3 months of their treatment with a chemotherapy that's never had a shot of working. And we're giving them a much better way to make that decision and getting on the right drug early. And so these patients now, if you're on a responder drug, you always live longer without progressing than people that got a drug that they were not a responder to. And your overall survival is much longer if you get a drug that you respond to. So the evidence is there, and that's what we're giving people. And when you think about it from a human perspective, it's the elderly grandparent that wants to go to their grandchild's wedding, and we're giving them that opportunity. It's the father who wants to walk their daughter down the aisle. We're giving them that opportunity. Whereas if they just did the standard of care and that wasn't a drug that their tumor responded to, they can be gone really, really quickly.
The live cell work is exciting, and some might think that only takes place in places like Boston or where you came from, California.
Yeah.
RTP maybe, but it's happening right here in South Carolina. What's the environment been like?
Yeah, it's the environment in South Carolina in general is been a game changer for Kiyatec. Spending 19 years in San Diego, where you have a lot of biotech and you have a lot of competition, there's not a lot of help for a small little startup. And in Greenville, South Carolina, it's the exact opposite. You look at partners like SCbio, SCRA, the Research Association, Venture South, which is a venture group of investors that are just from they started in South Carolina, but they're in the south of the US. Kiyatec doesn't make it without those groups. And in San Diego, it's kind of dog eat dog world, right? So if you call out for help, the responses are usually not very sincere. And so you're kind of on your own. Whereas in South Carolina, you can do a lot more. You get a lot more support from the community. And that's been a huge help for us. It doesn't hurt that South Carolina is becoming a very attractive place to live.
Yes.
If you think about Greenville, and I think about my lab staff, that are relatively young. So they've left college, they've got their lab degree, and now they want to work in biotech. Within 20 minutes outside of the center of Greenville, they can still get a house for under $500,000 and be able to raise a family and be successful and live in a really nice community. So that's a big benefit for us as well. So having the science can be done anywhere, but having the support staff and having the environment that allows a company like Kiyatec to thrive as long as we have, I think South Carolina has a lot to do with that.
Speaking of Kiyatec thriving,
Yeah.
what's kind of the growth trajectory? I mean, you've talked about the different types of cancers that you're looking at in terms of the service, but
Right.
what's the company's kind of growth over the next several years?
So if you think about the cancers that I said, right? So glioblastoma and ovarian are relatively small volume, right? So about 20 to 25,000 cases a year in each one of those categories. But when you start to get into breast cancer and non-small cell lung, you're talking about 250,000 to 275,000. So when you combine all of those cancers together, you're talking about a total available market of about $4 billion, which is really substantial,
Right.
which means that a company like Kiyatec can really grow in the Greenville community. We're very small now, about 13 employees. But 10 years from now, we could be, 1,000 employees because of the volume of the cancers that we're dealing with. So it's a huge market opportunity and a huge volume of cancer patients that we'll be able to serve.
Well, and there's so many different therapies available now, in terms of there's options to consider rather than just one standard of care depending on the type of cancer.
Yeah, and if you think about like glioblastoma, and we talked about how critical that is, I had Annalise Rodriguez, she is a surgeon from the University of Arkansas, and she's a tremendous innovator. And I heard her from a podium say, you've got to try everything. Like the kitchen sink, throw it in, right? Because glioblastoma is such a fast moving cancer. So one of the things that we do is when we provide a report back, we're doing an analysis across 12 different available chemotherapies. And a lot of our doctors will end up doing combination therapy. So they'll see that the patient responded to 2 drugs, and they'll determine that their patient should be able to tolerate a combination approach, and they'll try it. And they have a lot of success with increasing the patient's life by doing things like that.
Speaking of physicians, how important is it then to have partnerships or working relationships with surgeons, physicians in this area?
It's critical, right? So the surgeons, especially for brain cancer, are vital. They're usually the first doctor that's interacting with that patient. And so they need to introduce Kiyatec and our 3D Predict panel to the patients right away. And so we give them material to be able to do that. And the surgeon and their staff are the first ones to say, we think maybe you should consider sending your tissue to Kiyatec. So that's really important. And then after that, you need your oncology team, because they're the ones that are going to get the report, and they're the ones that are actually going to prescribe the drug. So the physician interaction is really, really important, and getting them to buy in is also a really critical step for us. One of the benefits with our technology is we're not actually charging the hospital. So we actually submit on behalf of the patient to their insurer. And that makes it a little bit easier for the physicians to say, we're going to start using your service, because the hospital is not on the hook for the test. It's really, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, United Healthcare, Cigna, that is, or CMS Medicare, that's going to pay for the test.
Right. And Lauren, when I learned this, I went, you do what and why? And then I even pressed during our prep call, and I'm like, well, what if someone doesn't have the money?
Yes.
So tell us.
Yeah. So we're for-profit business, but we do a lot of charity work.
Yeah.
So we have a very robust financial assistance program. So if you have insurance and we submit on your behalf, we will go through the entire appeal process alongside you to try to give the insurer all the information they need to be able to cover your treatment. Sometimes they still say no, unfortunately. And then we have a financial assistance program that patients can fill out. And I'm happy to say that as of today, the most anyone has paid out of pocket after going through the financial assistance program is $500.
What?
So it's quite remarkable. And we're not yet covered by Medicare. So, as the CEO of the company, I could have decided, well, if you're a Medicare patient, you can't get 3D Predict. That's not a decision that I was willing to make. So we know that we're not going to get any money for Medicare patients, but we feel like what we're doing is serving cancer patients, and we shouldn't turn anyone away. And so we will write that off and still process Medicare patients, even though we know we're not going to get covered. We do have a pathway, and we are working and communicating with CMS. So we do think that sometime in 2025, CMS will find a way to make sure that these patients get covered. But in the meantime, we're still going to process their tissue, and we're still going to deliver the results for those patients.
Bless you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's
I think it's important. I think it's critically important.
It's definitely important to each of those patients.
Yeah, for sure.
And for greater good. Eric, thank you for joining us. I look forward to joining you on a panel at SCbio coming up this afternoon, so everybody can hear the good work with 3D Predict.
Great.
Predict,
yep.
Yes. For those of you who joined our conversation today, we hope you learned a little bit more about Kiyatec and the work with live cell therapy. The website is very easy to use if you want to check that out. And Lauren and I look forward to seeing you next time right here on Taking the Pulse, a healthcare and life sciences video podcast.